The rope creaked in the wind, and Preston Davenport heard it before he saw what hung from the old stone bridge, 7 bodies swaying against the gray dawn sky. Their green skin stark against the weathered ropes, and his hand was already reaching for his knife, because he had seen enough death in the war to know he would not let this stand. He had been walking for 3 days since leaving the military encampment at Red Hill, his discharge papers folded in his coat pocket, and his conscience heavier than the pack on his shoulders. The war with the Orc clans had ended 6 months ago with a treaty nobody trusted, and Preston had spent those months wondering if anything he had done meant anything at all. Now, approaching the border town of Milldale where he hoped to start over, he found this. The bridge spanned the Clearwater River, a vital crossing point between human and Orc territories. As Preston drew closer, he could see that the bodies were all female Orcs, their hands bound behind their backs, crude signs hanging around their necks. He could not raid them from the ground, but he could guess their content. The hatred had not ended with the treaty. If anything, it had gone underground, become meaner, more desperate. Preston dropped his pack and scaled the bridge's stone supports with the ease of a man who had climbed fortress walls under arrow fire. His hands found familiar holds in the weathered stone, and within moments he was hauling himself onto the bridge deck. Up close, the scene was worse. These women had been young, some barely more than girls. The signs around their necks read variations of Orc lover, traitor, and monster sympathizer. He heard shouts from the town side of the bridge as he pulled out his knife, a curved blade he had taken from an Orc warrior who no longer needed it, who he had buried with full honors when the fighting stopped. The first rope parted with 2 sawing cuts, and Preston caught the body before it could fall into the river below, lowering it gently to the bridge deck. "Stop! What in the hell do you think you are doing?" A man's voice, rough with authority and anger. Preston did not stop. The second rope parted, then the third. More voices joined the first, a growing crowd gathering at the bridge entrance. He worked methodically, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. These women had been executed, hanged like common criminals, and from the condition of their bodies, it had happened sometime in the night. That is town justice, stranger. Those Orcs got what they deserved. Preston cut the 4th rope and finally looked up at the crowd. 24 men had gathered, some carrying clubs and farming tools. A man in a blacksmith's apron seemed to be their leader, his face red with indignation. Preston recognized the type men who had not fought in the war but had lost people to it, who had let their grief curdle into hate. Justice. Preston's voice carried across the bridge, cold and level. What crime deserved this? They were harboring Orc raiders, giving aid to our enemies. The war is over. The war is never over with their kind. Preston cut the 5th rope, then the 6th. His knife was sharp, and he knew how to use it. The crowd surged forward, but Preston turned to face them, and something in his stance, the way he held himself, the scars visible on his hands and neck, the absolute absence of fear in his eyes made them hesitate. "I served 3 years in the border campaigns," Preston said quietly. "I killed Orcs, a lot of Orcs. I also fought beside some after the alliance was formed. I held an Orc soldier named Groth while he died from wounds meant for me. He bled the same color I do." He turned back to the last rope. Whatever these women did or did not do, they deserved a trial, not a mob. The 7th rope parted and Preston caught the last body. She was small for an Orc, her tusks barely visible, her face young beneath the marks of violence. Something in his chest twisted painfully. She could not have been more than 20 summers. "You are going to regret this, stranger," the blacksmith said, but the crowd was already dispersing, muttering among themselves. They were brave enough to hang defenseless prisoners in the night, but not brave enough to face down a veteran who looked like he had walked through fire and came out the other side. Preston worked in the growing light, cutting the ropes from the women's wrists, arranging them side by side on the bridge deck with as much dignity as he could manage. He did not know Orc funeral customs, but he knew they deserved better than to rot on a bridge or float down the river like garbage. He was checking the last body when her eyes opened. Preston jerked back, his heart hammering. The young Orc woman stared up at him with dark amber eyes, wide with terror and confusion. Her throat was bruised, rope burns angry and red, but the hanging had not killed her. Perhaps the rope had loosened, or someone had cut her down too soon, or she was simply tougher than her executioners had expected. "Easy," Preston said, the same tone he had used with wounded soldiers. "Easy. I am not going to hurt you." She tried to speak and managed only a choked gasp. Her hands went to her throat and Preston saw the panic rising in her eyes. He grabbed his water skin and carefully helped her sit up, supporting her weight as she trembled violently. "Small sips," he said. "Your throat is badly damaged. Do not try to talk." She drank, coughed, drank again. Tears streamed down her green cheeks, cutting through the dirt and dried blood. She looked at the other bodies arranged beside her, and a sound of pure anguish tore from her damaged throat. "Were they family?" Preston asked gently. She nodded, then shook her head, then made a gesture he did not understand. He let her grieve, keeping one hand on her shoulder while she wept over the dead, touching their faces, their hands, whispering words in the Orc tongue that he did not know but understood all the same. "Goodbye. I am sorry. I love you." The sun was fully up when she finally turned back to him, her amber eyes searching his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She pointed at him, then at the cut ropes, then made a cutting gesture. "Yes," Preston said. "I cut them down, all of you." She touched her own chest, then pointed at him and pressed her palms together in what was clearly a gesture of gratitude or prayer. Then she tried to stand and immediately collapsed, her legs unable to hold her weight. Preston caught her before she hit the stone. "You are not going anywhere like this. You need rest, medicine, food." He glanced back at the town. "But not here." She understood, her eyes following his gaze. She made a pushing motion toward the town, then drew a finger across her throat. The message was clear: if they found her alive, they would finish what they started. "Can you walk at all?" Preston asked. She tried again and managed a few shaking steps before her knees buckled. Preston made a decision that would change everything. He gathered his pack, took one last look at the 6 dead Orc women on the bridge, and then carefully lifted the survivor into his arms. She stiffened, clearly torn between terror and necessity. Preston met her eyes. "I am taking you somewhere safe. That is all. I give you my word as a soldier." Something in his face must have convinced her, because she nodded and stopped struggling, though she held herself rigidly in his arms. Preston headed not toward Milldale but into the forest on the Orc side of the river, following a hunter's trail that would keep them hidden from both communities. He had fought in these woods once, had tracked Orc raiders through this terrain. He knew where the old camps were, the hidden places where soldiers on both sides had sheltered during the war. There was a cave about 3 miles north, near a spring, where he had once spent 2 weeks recovering from a wound. It would do. The Orc woman passed out after the first mile, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion and trauma. Preston was grateful for that. It meant she could not see him stumbling over roots, his own exhaustion catching up to him. He had not slept in a real bed for weeks, had been eating trail rations and whatever he could forage. His shoulder, broken 2 years ago by an Orc war club and never properly healed, was screaming by the time he found the cave. He laid her down on a bed of moss and pine branches, then built a small fire near the entrance where the smoke would dissipate among the trees. He had medicine in his pack, herbs, bandages, a small bottle of spirits he had been saving. He heated water and began cleaning the rope burns on her neck as gently as he could. She woke several times, each time jerking away before recognizing him and forcing herself to stay still. Her eyes never left his face, watching his every movement with an animal wariness that broke his heart. What had she endured before the hanging? What had she seen? "My name is Preston," he said as he worked, keeping his voice low and steady. "Preston Davenport. I am a soldier, or I was. The war is over for me now." He cleaned the wounds on her wrists where the ropes had cut deep. "I am going to take care of you until you are well enough to go wherever you need to go. That is all. I am not going to hurt you, and I am not going to turn you over to anyone. You have my word." She watched him, and slowly, infinitely slowly, some of the terror faded from her eyes. Preston made a thin soup from dried meat and roots, feeding it to her spoonful by spoonful. She ate mechanically, her eyes distant, and he recognized the look of someone whose mind had gone somewhere else to escape unbearable reality. He had worn that look himself, after certain battles. When she finally slept, properly slept, Preston allowed himself to rest. He sat with his back against the cave wall, his knife within easy reach, and let his eyes close. He had not planned on this. He had planned on finding a quiet town, maybe working as a blacksmith or a carpenter, living out his days in peace. Instead, he had just made himself an enemy of Milldale and probably several other settlements, and he was now responsible for an orc woman who could not even tell him her name. He should have walked away, left the bodies on the bridge, found his quiet life. But Preston had walked away from too many things in his life, and the war had taught him that some lines could not be uncrossed. You either stood for something, or you stood for nothing, and he had seen what nothing looked like. It looked like 7 bodies swaying in the wind. He slept poorly, waking at every sound, but the forest remained quiet. When dawn came, he found the orc woman awake, sitting up and touching her throat with careful fingers. She looked at him, and this time there was something different in her eyes. Not trust exactly, but curiosity. She pointed at him and raised her eyebrows in question. "Preston," he repeated. "Preston Davenport." She nodded, then touched her own chest. She opened her mouth, and a rasping sound emerged that might have been words. She grimaced in frustration and tried again. "Ka." The sound was barely audible, painful to hear. "Kara, Kara," Preston repeated, and she nodded, relief flooding her face. "That is a good name." Over the next few days they fell into a careful routine. Preston hunted and foraged, bringing back rabbits, fish from the stream, edible plants. Kara could not eat much at first, her throat too damaged, but gradually she regained her strength. She could not speak except in painful whispers, and even those seemed to cost her greatly, so they communicated through gestures and the few words she could manage. Preston learned that she was 19 summers old, that the 6 women on the bridge had been her sisters and cousins, part of a small clan that had settled on the border to farm and trade. He learned that they had been accused of harboring raiders, a false charge. Kara insisted, her eyes flashing with anger, and that the mob had come in the night. The men of their clan had been away, hunting in the deep woods, which was likely why the mob had chosen that moment to strike. He learned that Kara was a weaver, that she had been preparing for her bonding ceremony before everything fell apart, that her intended had died in the war's final battle. He learned that she loved music, and that she could make a bird call so perfect that actual birds would answer. He learned that despite everything, she still laughed, a rusty, painful sound at first, but real. Preston told her about his own life in return, speaking more than he had in months. He told her about growing up on a farm in the southern provinces, about joining the army at 17 to escape a father who drank too much and hit too hard. He told her about the war, about battles and sieges, about friends lost and enemies who became friends. He told her about the Orc soldier Groth, who had taught him 3 words in the Orc tongue and made him promise to visit his family if he died. "I never did," Preston admitted one night, staring into the fire. "I was too much of a coward. I did not know what to say to them." Kara reached out and touched his hand, the first time she had initiated contact. Her palm was warm and calloused from work. She shook her head, and though she could not say the words, he understood. Not a coward, just human. A week passed, then 2. Kara's voice began to return, though it was rougher than before, deeper. Her strength came back quickly once she could eat properly, and Preston was reminded that orcs were simply built differently than humans. What would have taken him a month to recover from took her half that time. They should have parted ways. Kara was well enough to travel, and Preston knew he was only delaying the inevitable. She needed to find her clan, and he needed to find his fresh start. But neither of them seemed ready to leave the cave, the safety of their small fire and the strange companionship they had built. "Where will you go?" Preston asked one evening, watching her mend his spare shirt with strips of bark she had processed into thread. Her hands moved with practiced skill, creating stitches so small and even he could barely see them. "North," Kara said, her voice still raspy but stronger. "To the Stone Peak clan. They will take me in. My grandmother came from their line. That is a long journey, 2 weeks on foot, maybe more." "I know." She bit off the thread and handed him the shirt. "Where will you go?" "I do not know any more." Preston had given up on Milldale. He would not be welcome there, not after what he had done. "West, maybe. Find a homestead that needs a hand. Change my name. Start over somewhere nobody knows what I did in the war." Kara was quiet for a long moment. "What you did in the war matters less than what you did on that bridge. Maybe, maybe not. You saved my life, you." She touched her throat, struggling with the words. "You gave my sisters dignity in death. You owed us nothing. We were not your people. You are people. That is enough." Something in her expression changed, softened. "Most humans would not say that. Most humans are fools." She laughed, that rusty sound that was becoming familiar. Then her smile faded. "Preston, when I am gone, you will forget about the orc woman in the cave. You will find your new life. You should." "Is that what you want?" Kara looked away. "What I want does not matter. It matters to me." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to address. Kara stood abruptly and walked to the cave entrance, staring out at the night forest. Preston wanted to follow, wanted to say something more, but he did not trust himself to speak. The next morning, everything changed. Preston was checking his snares when he heard voices in the forest, human voices, speaking low and urgent. He froze, every instinct screaming danger. He had been careful to cover their tracks, to keep the fire small and smokeless, but hunters could stumble on the cave by accident. He abandoned the snares and moved silently back toward the cave, using every trick he had learned in 3 years of forest warfare. As he drew closer, he saw them 4 men, armed with bows and spears, moving deliberately through the undergrowth. They were searching for something, or someone. Preston reached the cave just ahead of them. Kara was already alert, her body tense, having heard the same sounds he had. Preston grabbed his pack and helped her erase signs of their occupation, scattering the fire and covering the entrance with branches. "We need to move," he whispered. "Now." They slipped out the back of the cave through a narrow gap that opened onto a steep hillside. Preston had scouted the escape route days ago out of soldier's habit, and now that caution paid off. They climbed, moving as quietly as possible as voices echoed from the cave below. Someone was here. The fire is still warm, spread out. They cannot have gone far. Preston and Kara climbed higher, using the dense forest cover. But Kara's foot slipped on loose stone, and the clatter of rocks down the slope was like thunder in the silence. There, up the hill, an arrow hissed past Preston's head and buried itself in a tree trunk. He grabbed Kara's hand and they ran, abandoning stealth for speed. More arrows followed them, and Preston heard the men crashing through the undergrowth in pursuit. They ran for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Preston's lungs burned, and even Kara was gasping. They broke out of the forest onto a ridge top, and Preston's heart sank. The ridge ended in a cliff, a 50-foot drop to the river below. They were trapped. The hunters emerged from the trees, spreading out in a semicircle. Preston recognized the blacksmith from Milldale among them. The man's face split in a triumphant grin. Well, the orc lover and his pet monster. We figured you were still around here somewhere, stranger. That cave of yours was not as secret as you thought. Preston moved in front of Kara, his hand on his knife. Let her go. Your quarrel is with me. Our quarrel is with any orc breathing our air, another man said, fitting an arrow to his bow. And with any human who betrays his own kind for monsters. She is not a monster, and I am not betraying anyone by refusing to let you commit murder. Murder, that is rich. You got any idea how many of our people her kind killed in the war? About as many as we killed of theirs. That is how war works, but the war is over. Not for us. Not while orcs still draw breath. The men advanced, weapons ready. Preston knew he could not fight 4 armed men, not and protect Kara too. His mind raced through possibilities, each bleaker than the last. If he surrendered, they would kill Kara and probably him too. If he fought, he might take 1 or 2 down before they overwhelmed him, but the end would be the same. Kara stepped up beside him, her voice rough but clear. I will go with them. They want me, not you. You can leave. No, Preston, you have done enough, more than anyone could ask. Do not die for me. That is not your choice to make. It is. I will not let another person I care about die because of me. Preston turned to look at her, and something in her amber eyes hit him like a physical blow. She meant it. She would surrender herself to save him. And somewhere in the past 2 weeks, in the quiet moments around the fire and the small kindnesses exchanged, he had started to care about her more than he was willing to admit. I am not letting them take you, he said quietly. I do not care what it costs. The blacksmith laughed. How touching. Do not worry, you will die together. We will hang you right beside the orc scum. Let the crows pick you both clean. Preston felt Kara tense beside him, preparing to make some desperate move. He caught her wrist, squeezing gently. Trust me, he whispered. Then he did something completely insane. He turned, wrapped his arms around Kara, and jumped off the cliff. For a heartbeat, there was only the sensation of falling, the wind rushing past, Kara's scream in his ear. Then they hit the water, and the world became a chaos of cold and current and desperate struggling. Preston held onto Kara with one arm while fighting to reach the surface with the other. His feet touched rocks, pushed off. They broke the surface together, gasping. The river was swift here, pulling them downstream away from the cliff. Arrows plinked into the water around them, but the current was too fast and the angle too difficult. The hunters tried to follow along the bank, but the terrain was rough and they quickly fell behind. Preston swam for the far shore, towing Kara with him. She was struggling to swim with her injuries still not fully healed, her heavy clothes dragging her down. Preston's bad shoulder was screaming, but he ignored it, focused only on reaching safety. They dragged themselves onto a muddy bank a quarter-mile downstream, collapsing in the shallows. For several minutes, they could only lie there, coughing up river water and trying to breathe. Preston's shoulder felt like someone had driven a spike through it, and his vision was graying at the edges. Kara recovered first, rolling over to check on him. "Are you hurt? Did you hit rocks?" "Just my shoulder, old injury, I will be fine." "That was insane. We could have died." "Better than the alternative." She stared at him, water streaming from her hair, her amber eyes wide. Then, without warning, she kissed him. It was not a romantic kiss, not really. It was raw and desperate, tasting of river water and fear and gratitude. It lasted only a moment before she pulled back, looking as surprised as he felt. Kara started, then stopped. "I am sorry, I should not have." Preston sat up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "Do not apologize. We need to keep moving. Those men might cross upstream and cut us off." Kara nodded, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that neither was ready to examine but could no longer deny. They walked through the afternoon, following the river north into Orc territory. Preston's shoulder got worse with every mile, the pain radiating down his arm and into his chest. He tried to hide it, but Kara noticed. "You need to rest," she said. "You are hurt worse than you are saying." "I am fine." "You are limping, and you are pale. We stop here." There was no point arguing with her when she used that tone. They found a sheltered spot beneath a fallen tree and made a cold camp. Kara insisted on examining his shoulder, and Preston reluctantly let her pull off his wet shirt. The bruising was spectacular, dark purple spreading from his shoulder joint across his chest. Kara hissed through her teeth. "This is bad. The bone might be broken again." "It is not broken, just angry, happens sometimes when I stress it." "You stress it by jumping off cliffs while carrying people." Despite the pain, Preston smiled. "Not usually, no." Kara made him lie down and used moss and cold river water to make a compress, laying it carefully over the worst of the bruising. Her hands were gentle, but even gentle pressure made Preston grit his teeth. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did, for all of it. You thanked me already." "Not with words." Preston met her eyes. "I do not regret that either if you are worried." Color flushed her green cheeks, darker green spreading up from her neck. "I do not know what I was thinking, You could have let them take me. You could have walked away at the bridge. You could have walked away a dozen times. But you keep choosing to stay, to risk everything, and I do not understand why." "Because it is the right thing to do. No one else thinks so. To humans, I am a monster. To my own people, you are the enemy. There is no world where this makes sense." Preston was quiet for a moment. "Maybe that is exactly why it matters, because it does not make sense to anyone but us." Kara looked away, blinking rapidly. "When I was young, my grandmother told me stories about the old times before the wars. She said humans and orcs used to trade peacefully, even lived in the same settlements sometimes. She said we were not so different, that we both loved and feared and hoped for the same things. I thought she was telling fairy tales. Maybe she was telling the truth. If she was, the world forgot it. Everything I was taught about humans said you were cruel, treacherous, weak. You could not be trusted. And then you cut me down from that rope, and everything I thought I knew became complicated." Preston sat up slowly, keeping the compress in place. "You are not what I was taught about orcs either. I was told you were all savage, violent, incapable of mercy. But I watched you weep over your sisters. I watched you mend my shirt with more care than anyone has shown me in years. You are brave and kind and stubborn, and you are nothing like the monsters they told me about. So what do we do?" Kara's voice was barely a whisper. "Where do we go from here? I do not know, but I know I am not ready to say goodbye, not yet. Preston, there is no future for us. You know that, even if we wanted." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. My people would never accept you. Your people already want you dead for helping me. The best we can hope for is that we both survive long enough to go our separate ways. Is that what you want?" Kara closed her eyes. "What I want does not matter." "It matters to me," Preston said again, echoing his words from before. "Kara, look at me." She opened her eyes and he saw fear there, but also hope. Dangerous hope. "I spent 3 years fighting a war I did not believe in, for causes I did not understand, killing people I had no quarrel with. I followed orders. I did what I was told, and at the end of it all, I had nothing but scars and nightmares and the knowledge that everything I did was meaningless." He reached out and carefully took her hand. "But pulling you down from that bridge, keeping you safe, these past 2 weeks, that has meant something. You mean something. So yes, what you want matters to me because for the first time in my life I am choosing something that matters." Kara's grip on his hand tightened. "I want you to be safe. I want you to have the life you deserve, the fresh start you came here looking for. And what do you want for yourself?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost did not hear, "I want you to stay." Preston felt something in his chest unlock, a tightness he had been carrying for so long he had forgotten it was there. "Then I will stay." "It is insane." "Yes, we will have nowhere to go, hunted by both our peoples. I know. It might get us both killed, probably." Despite everything, Kara laughed. "You are completely mad. So I have been told." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I am terrified. Me too." They stayed like that for a while, drawing comfort from each other's presence. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they began to plan. The Stone Peak clan was still their best option, Kara decided. They were one of the more progressive Orc clans, and her grandmother's connection might buy them at least a hearing. If Preston could prove his intentions were honorable, if Kara vouched for him, there was a small chance they might be given shelter. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. They traveled for 5 more days, moving cautiously through the wilderness. Preston's shoulder slowly improved under Kara's care, and they fell into an easy rhythm. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Preston told her about his mother, who had died when he was young, and his younger sister, who he had not seen in 5 years. Kara told him about learning to weave from her grandmother, about the satisfaction of creating beauty from simple threads. They avoided both human and Orc settlements, living off the land. Preston taught Kara how to set snares the human way, and she showed him which plants were edible that he had been walking past for years. They laughed more than Preston had laughed in years, finding humor in small disasters and shared struggles. One night, camped beneath the stars, Kara asked him about the Orc soldier he had mentioned, Groth. Preston stared into the fire, remembering. "We were pinned down in a valley, my unit and a group of Orc warriors. The treaty had just been signed, but some of our commanders were still fighting. We were supposed to hold the valley against Orc reinforcements, and they were supposed to push through. But then, a third force showed up, deserters from both sides who had banded together into something worse than either army. They did not care about treaties or honor. They just wanted blood and loot." Kara listened quietly, her face illuminated by firelight. "Groth and I ended up back to back in the fighting," Preston continued. "We could not speak each other's language, not really, but we understood each other where it counted. He saved my life twice that day, and I saved his once. When it was over, when the deserters were dead or scattered, we sat together and shared water. He taught me 3 words in your tongue, I taught him 3 in mine." "What words, brother?" "Brave, peace." Preston smiled sadly. "He made me promise that if he died in the fighting, I would go to his clan and tell them he died well. But then a week later he took a spear meant for me, died in my arms, and I never kept my promise. I told myself it was too dangerous, that the war was still too raw. But really, I was just afraid. Kara reached out and squeezed his hand. It is not too late. After we reach Stone Peak, we could try to find his family, together. The idea had not occurred to Preston, but now that she said it, he knew it was right. Yes, yes, I would like that. Tell me their names, what you remember. I can help you find them. Preston told her everything he remembered about Groth, his clan name, his descriptions of his home territory, the scars on his arms that told stories Preston did not know. Kara absorbed it all, promising they would search once they were safe. On the 8th day after leaving the cave, they reached the foothills of the Stone Peak Mountains. Kara grew tense as they entered Orc lands properly, constantly scanning the forest for patrols. Preston let her take the lead, trusting her knowledge of her people's ways. They were found, inevitably, by an Orc hunting party. 6 warriors, all male, all armed with spears and axes. They surrounded Preston and Kara before either could react, and Preston saw the exact moment when they recognized what they were seeing: an Orc woman traveling with a human man. The leader, a massive Orc with a scarred face and graying hair, addressed Kara in the Orc tongue. His tone was harsh, demanding. Kara responded, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. The exchange went back and forth, growing more heated. Preston could not understand the words, but he understood the situation. He was an enemy in their lands, and Kara was being questioned for bringing him here. When one of the warriors moved toward him with a spear raised, Preston forced himself to remain still, hands visible and empty. Kara stepped between them, speaking rapidly. She pointed at her own throat, at the faded bruises there, then at Preston. She spoke with her whole body, gesturing, her voice rising with passion. Whatever she said, it made the warriors hesitate. The leader studied Preston with dark, intelligent eyes. Then he spoke, and Preston was shocked to hear human words, heavily accented but clear. You are the human who cut down the hanged women at Milldale Bridge. Yes. Why? Because it was wrong. They were not your people. They were people, that was enough. The warrior leader grunted. She says you have protected her, risked your life multiple times. She says you seek sanctuary with Stone Peak clan. That is true. You were a soldier. You killed Orcs in the war. Yes. There was no point denying it. I did. I also fought beside Orcs after the alliance. I mourned them when they fell. The war is over. I want no part of more killing. The leader was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision. You will come with us. The clan elders will decide what to do with you. If you try to run or fight, we will kill you. If you cooperate, you will be treated fairly. This is our way. I understand. I will cooperate. They were escorted through the mountains along paths Preston never would have found on his own. The Orc warriors kept him separate from Kara, and he hated not being able to speak to her to reassure her. She looked back at him constantly, her worry evident. As they walked, Preston studied his captors. They were professional, efficient, watchful but not needlessly cruel. They reminded him of good soldiers everywhere, doing a job, following orders, but still thinking for themselves. When one noticed Preston stumbling on the rocky path with his bad shoulder, he slowed the pace slightly without comment. Stone Peak settlement was larger than Preston expected, built into the side of the mountain itself. Cave dwellings connected by stone pathways, with smoke rising from carefully concealed chimneys. Orc families paused in their work to stare as the party entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Children pointed and whispered until their parents pulled them away. They were brought to a large cave that served as a council chamber. Carved benches ringed a central fire pit, and Preston counted 9 elders, 5 women, and 4 men, all gray-haired and weathered by age. Kara was brought to stand before them, and Preston was positioned beside her but slightly behind, the warriors making their positions clear. The questioning began in the Orc tongue, with Kara answering. Preston caught his own name several times, and Groth's name and Mildale. He stood quietly, trying to look respectful and non-threatening, acutely aware of the spears pointed in his direction. Finally, one of the female elders switched to human speech, addressing Preston directly. "You understand why you are viewed with suspicion, human?" "I do, elder. I am a stranger, a former enemy soldier in your lands without permission. Kara tells us extraordinary things about you. That you saved her from execution, protected her, asked nothing in return. Are these things true?" "Yes, elder." "Why?" It was the same question everyone asked, as if basic decency required elaborate explanation. "Because leaving her to die would have been wrong. Because she is a person who deserved help. Because I have seen enough death." "Pretty words, but you killed our people in the war. Why should we believe you have changed?" Preston took a breath. "I have not changed, elder. I was the same person then as now. I followed orders, fought battles I was told to fight, but I also gave water to wounded Orc soldiers when I could. I buried enemy dead with honors. I wept for them as I wept for my own fallen." He met her eyes. "The war was wrong. I knew it even then, but I was too much of a coward to walk away. When I saw Kara and her sisters hanging from that bridge, I could not be a coward anymore. I had to do something that mattered, something right, even if it cost me everything." Another elder spoke, a man with one eye and deep scars across his face. "You cannot stay here. Even if we believe you, the clan will not accept a human living among us. There is too much hate, too much grief. Your presence would tear us apart." Preston's heart sank, but he nodded. "I understand. I ask only that Kara be allowed to stay to be safe. I will leave and not return." "No." Kara's voice rang out, clear and strong. She addressed the elders in human speech, apparently for Preston's benefit. "He does not leave alone. If he goes, I go with him." "Child, be reasonable," the female elder said gently. "You have lost your sisters. Your clan is destroyed. You need the protection of Stone Peak. This human cannot give you that. He has given me more protection than anyone. He has shown me more kindness than my own people showed my sisters." Kara's voice shook but held firm. "I claim bonding right. He is mine and I am his. By tradition, you cannot separate bonded pairs." Shocked silence filled the chamber. Even the warriors looked stunned. The elders exchanged glances, and Preston realized Kara had just done something massive, invoked some law or custom that changed everything. "You cannot be serious," one of the male elders said. "Bond with a human. It is forbidden, unnatural." "Where in the old laws does it say that?" Kara demanded. "Show me. The bonding laws speak of choosing a mate who is strong, loyal, and true. They say nothing about species." "If the elders wish to deny my claim, let them cite the law I am breaking." The elders had no answer. They argued among themselves in the Orc tongue, voices rising and falling. Preston stood frozen, trying to process what Kara had just done. Bonding, that was marriage, was it not? She had essentially just claimed him as her husband in front of her people's leaders, and he had not even been consulted. He should have been angry at the presumption. Instead, his heart was pounding with something that felt dangerously close to joy. Finally, the female elder raised her hand for silence. She looked tired. "This is unprecedented. We must consult the old texts, seek guidance. Until then, you both will remain as guests confined to guest quarters. You will not leave without permission. In 3 days we will give our judgment." They were led to a small cave dwelling carved into the mountain. It was simple but comfortable, with sleeping furs, a small fire pit, and a shelf holding basic provisions. The warrior who brought them there said something in the orc tongue to Kara that made her blush, then left them alone. Preston waited until they were completely alone before speaking. Bonding, Kara would not meet his eyes. It was the only way. If I claimed you as my intended mate, they have to at least consider allowing you to stay. Bonding rights are sacred in orc culture. They cannot simply dismiss them. You should have asked me first. Would you have said yes? Preston moved closer to her. Yes, Kara finally looked up at him, surprise and hope warring in her amber eyes. Truly, did you mean it? Preston asked. Or was it just strategy? Kara struggled with the words. I do not know. Both. When I thought about you leaving, about never seeing you again, I could not breathe. And I realized that somewhere in the past weeks you stopped being the human who saved me and became more. Everything I want and everything I fear all tangled together. Preston reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. I am terrified too. This is insane. We have known each other barely 3 weeks. We are from different species, different worlds. Every sensible part of me says this cannot work. But when I think about walking away from you, it feels like dying. When I think about a future, you are in it. And maybe that is insane, but I have been sane and careful my whole life, and it got me nothing but scars and regrets. He leaned his forehead against hers. So yes, I would have said yes. I do say yes, if you will have me. Kara kissed him then, properly this time. Not desperate or rushed like after the river, but slow and deliberate, a kiss that felt like a promise. Preston pulled her closer, careful of her still healing injuries, and let himself fall into the impossible rightness of holding her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kara smiled. The warrior who brought us here made a crude joke about me breaking you in half on the sleeping furs. Preston laughed. That is a real concern. You are much more fragile than orc men. I will have to be gentle with you. I am tougher than I look. We shall see. They spent the evening talking about the future, making plans that felt like building castles in air but gave them hope anyway. If the elders allowed it, they could stay with Stone Peak. Preston could hunt, build, contribute to the clan. Kara could weave. They could make a life here, even if it would be difficult, and if the elders refused. Then they would leave together, find somewhere remote to settle. Build a cabin in the wilderness, far from both humans and orcs. Live quietly, simply together. We should try to find Groth's family, Kara reminded him. Honor your promise. It might help the elders see that you respect orc ways. You are right. Do you think there is time before the judgment, we can ask? Over the next 2 days, Kara made inquiries with the warriors and clan members they encountered. Most were wary of Preston, but Kara's status as a survivor of the Milldale massacre and her claim of bonding rights gave her a certain protection. She was stubborn and persuasive, and eventually she learned that a warrior named Groth from the Stone River clan had indeed died in the war, and his family lived only half a day's journey from Stone Peak. The elders, when approached, were surprisingly agreeable to a supervised visit. Perhaps they saw it as a test of Preston's character, or perhaps they were simply curious. Either way, Preston and Kara were given permission to travel to the Stone River settlement, escorted by 2 warriors. Groth's family lived in a small dwelling on the outskirts of the Stone River village. His mother was still alive, a weathered orc woman with Groth's same kind eyes. When Preston approached and spoke Groth's name, she stiffened. "You knew my son?" she asked in halting human speech. "Yes, we fought together in the last battle before the treaty. He saved my life." Preston's voice cracked. "And then he died saving it again. He made me promise to come to you to tell you he died bravely and well. I should have come sooner. I am sorry it took me so long." Groth's mother studied him for a long moment, then gestured for him to enter her home. Inside, surrounded by Groth's siblings and extended family, Preston told them everything. How Groth had fought, how he had laughed in the face of death, how he had taught Preston the words for brother, brave, and peace. How at the end he had smiled and told Preston to live well. Preston had carried Groth's knife since that day, cleaning it and caring for it. He offered it back to the family now. This should be with his people. Groth's mother took the knife with shaking hands. She held it to her chest and wept, and her children wept with her. Through her tears, she thanked Preston for honoring her son's memory, for keeping his weapon with such care, for finally bringing them the story of his death. "He spoke of you," she said, "in his last letter home before the final battle. He said he had fought beside a human soldier, that they had become brothers despite everything. He said he hoped to introduce you properly when the war ended." She smiled sadly. "He would be glad to know you survived, that you found peace." "I am trying to," Preston said. "Your son taught me that enemies can become brothers. I am trying to live by that lesson." When they left, Groth's mother embraced Preston, a gesture of acceptance that brought tears to his eyes. Kara walked beside him in comfortable silence as they returned to Stone Peak, the escorting warriors keeping their distance. "That was a good thing you did," Kara said quietly. "It was long overdue, still good." The day of judgment arrived. Preston and Kara were brought before the elders again, and this time the entire clan seemed to be present, packing the council chamber and spilling out into the adjoining caves. Preston felt their eyes on him, hostile, curious, fearful. The female elder who had spoken before stood. "We have consulted the old texts. We have debated among ourselves. We have spoken to the Stone River clan about your visit to Groth's family." She paused. "Preston Davenport, you are an unusual human. You have shown honor, courage, and respect for our ways. You have proven that not all humans are our enemies." Hope flared in Preston's chest. "However," the elder continued, "your presence among us is still a source of conflict. Many of our people lost loved ones to human soldiers. They see you and remember their grief. We cannot force them to accept you, and we will not tear our clan apart to protect you." The hope guttered and died. "But," the elder said, and hope flickered again, "Kara's bonding claim is valid under our laws. If she truly wishes to bond with you, we cannot prevent it. Such a bonding between human and orc would be the first in living memory. It would be a powerful symbol, a step toward true peace between our peoples." The elder looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of her clan. "I propose a trial period, 6 months. Preston Davenport will live among us, work among us, prove himself. If after 6 months he has shown himself to be a worthy member of this clan, the bonding will be recognized and he will be accepted as one of us. If he fails, or if the clan cannot accept his presence, he will leave and not return. Kara may choose to go with him or stay with us." "What if I succeed?" Preston asked. "What if I prove myself but the clan still will not accept me? Then we will revisit this decision. But you must understand, human, you will be walking a knife's edge. Any transgression, any conflict will be held against you. You must be beyond reproach." It was not the answer Preston wanted, but it was more than he had expected. He looked at Kara and she nodded. "I accept," Preston said. "Thank you for this chance, elders." The elders conferred and announced their judgment to the clan. The reaction was mixed, some approving, others clearly angry. But the judgment had been made, and orc culture placed great weight on the decisions of elders. Preston and Kara were given a small dwelling on the edge of the settlement. It was clear this was both practical and symbolic, close enough to be part of the community, far enough that those who objected could avoid them easily. The first weeks were hard. Preston worked dawn to dusk, helping with any task that needed doing. He hauled water, chopped wood, hunted, built. repaired. He spoke to everyone with respect, learned Orc customs, tried to prove himself valuable. Some clan members warmed to him gradually, especially after hearing about his visit to Groth's family. Others remained coldly hostile. Kara faced her own challenges. Some saw her bonding claim as a betrayal, consorting with a human who had killed their kin. Others were more understanding, especially the women, who saw in Kara's story a reflection of their own losses and struggles. But through it all, they had each other. In the evenings, they would return to their dwelling and find peace in simple companionship. Kara taught Preston to speak Orc properly, and he proved an eager if clumsy student. Preston taught Kara the human card games he had learned as a soldier, and they spent hours playing by firelight, laughing at each other's mistakes. And slowly, carefully, they built a physical relationship that matched their emotional bond. Kara had been right to worry Orcs were simply stronger than humans, and she had to be mindful of her strength. But they learned each other's boundaries, discovered what brought pleasure and comfort. The first time they made love fully, it was gentle and awkward and perfect. Two people from different worlds finding unity in the most fundamental way. 2 months into the trial period, Preston was hunting with a group of Orc warriors when they were attacked by a bear, a massive beast, maddened by some injury, that charged out of the undergrowth. The Orcs scattered and the bear went after the youngest warrior, a boy barely old enough to carry a spear. Preston did not think. He threw himself at the bear, knife in hand, knowing he was too small and too weak to fight such a creature, but doing it anyway. He managed to stab it in the shoulder before it threw him off, and his bad shoulder took the brunt of the impact when he hit a tree. The other warriors rallied, driving their spears into the bear until it fell. When they turned to Preston, he was barely conscious, his shoulder dislocated and blood streaming from a gash on his head. They carried him back to Stone Peak, and Kara was there to meet them, her face white with fear. The clan healer, an old Orc woman named Masha, tended his wounds while Kara held his hand. The young warrior Preston had saved stood in the corner, shame and gratitude warring on his face. "Foolish human," Masha muttered as she reset his shoulder, ignoring his gasp of pain. "Fighting bears. Idiot." But when she finished, she patted his uninjured shoulder with surprising gentleness. "Brave idiot, though. You will live." Word of the incident spread through the clan. The boy's family came to thank Preston, and his mother wept and called Preston a hero. Others heard the story and softened their stance. He had risked his life for one of their children, asked nothing in return. It was the kind of courage they respected. The tide was beginning to turn. 3 months in, during the Harvest Festival, Preston was invited to participate in the warrior competitions. It was a significant honor, allowing him to compete alongside Orc warriors in tests of skill and strength. He knew he could not match them in raw power, but he had his own skills. The archery competition came first, and Preston surprised everyone by outscoring all but the best Orc archers. 3 years of military training showed. The tracking challenge was next, and Preston's experience as a scout served him well. He did poorly in the strength contests, as expected, but his showing in the skill-based competitions earned respect. The final event was a mock battle, teams of warriors fighting with blunted weapons. Preston was picked for a team, and he fought smart, using speed and tactics to compensate for his relative weakness. When his team won, his teammates lifted him on their shoulders and cheered, and Preston saw Kara in the crowd, beaming with pride. That night at the feast, the clan leader, the scarred warrior who had first captured them, approached Preston. "You fight well for a human. I had good teachers. You are winning them over, my people. Slowly, but it is happening. I am trying." The leader nodded. "My name is Throck. Groth was my nephew. His mother told me what you did, honoring his memory. That meant something to my family." He paused. "You are a good man, Preston Davenport. I will speak for you at the judgment when the time comes." Preston felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." 4 months in, a human merchant caravan arrived at the border, seeking to trade with Stone Peak clan. It was a rare event, always tense, but the elders valued the trade goods enough to allow it. Preston was asked to serve as translator and intermediary, using his knowledge of both cultures to smooth negotiations. He handled it well, showing respect to both sides, finding compromises, building trust. The head merchant, an older man named Marcus, took Preston aside at one point. "You are the human living with the Orcs, yes. I heard about you. People talk. They say you cut down hanged Orcs at Milldale." "Yes. Brave thing to do. Stupid, maybe, but brave. Those settlers will kill you if they get the chance." "I know." Marcus studied him. "You happy here?" "Living with greenskins." Preston bristled at the slur but kept his voice level. "I am happy with my mate, my life." "Yes. Well, more power to you. World needs more folks willing to cross divides." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You ever need anything from the human side, you ask for me." Marcus grieves. "I do not forget people who build bridges." The trade concluded successfully, and the elders thanked Preston for his help. More goodwill earned, more progress made. 5 months in, winter settled over the mountains. Preston and Kara huddled together against the cold, their dwelling warmed by a fire and their shared body heat. They talked about the approaching judgment, about their future. "I think they will accept you," Kara said one night, tracing patterns on his chest. "You have proven yourself 10 times over. Some still hate me, I see it in their eyes. Some always will. You cannot change everyone, but enough have changed. Enough see you as a person, not just a human. If they do accept me, we should have a proper bonding ceremony. Do it right by your people's traditions." Kara smiled. "You would do that. Submit to Orc bonding rituals, of course. I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours. I want to honor your culture, your ways." She kissed him, slow and deep. "I love you." "I do not think I have said that clearly before, but I do. I love you, Preston Davenport." "I love you too, Kara, more than I thought I could love anyone." They made love slowly that night, savoring each touch, each whispered word. Outside, snow fell silently, blanketing the world in white. Inside, they held each other and dreamed of the future. The final month passed quickly. Preston continued his work, continued proving himself. He helped repair storm damage to several dwellings. He organized a successful hunt that brought down enough meat to feed the clan for weeks. He told stories to the children, teaching them about human culture in exchange for learning more about Orc traditions. And finally, the day of judgment arrived. The council chamber was packed again, even more crowded than the first judgment. Preston and Kara stood before the elders, holding hands, and Preston felt surprisingly calm. He had done everything he could. The rest was up to the clan. The female elder stood, the same one who had spoken before. 6 months have passed since we placed Preston Davenport on trial. In that time he has worked hard, honored our ways, and proven himself brave and true. He has saved one of our children from death. He has fought alongside our warriors. He has facilitated successful trade with humans. He has shown respect and humility. She paused, looking around the chamber. The question before us now is simple. Does this human belong among us? Does he deserve to be bonded to Kara and accepted as a member of Stone Peak clan? Throck stood. "I speak for him. He honored my nephew's memory and has proven himself worthy." The healer Masha stood. "I speak for him. He is brave and kind." The young warrior Preston had saved from the bear stood. "I speak for him. I owe him my life." One by one, Orcs stood and spoke for Preston. Some who had been hostile at first, won over by his actions. Some who had been neutral, impressed by his dedication. Not everyone stood. There were still those who could not or would not accept a human among them. But more than half the clan rose to their feet, speaking for him. Preston felt tears stinging his eyes. Kara squeezed his hand, her own eyes bright. The elders conferred briefly, but the outcome was clear. The female elder smiled. "Preston Davenport, the clan has spoken. You are accepted. You will be bonded to Kara with full honors, and you will be recognized as a member of Stone Peak clan, with all rights and responsibilities that entails." The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Kara threw her arms around Preston, laughing and crying at the same time. He held her tight, overwhelmed by relief and joy and the simple impossibility of this moment. They had done it. Against all odds, they had built a life together. The bonding ceremony was held 3 days later, under a full moon. It was a traditional Orc ceremony, full of rituals Preston did not fully understand but participated in with reverence. He and Kara exchanged vows before the clan, their words simple but heartfelt. "I choose you," Preston said, looking into Kara's amber eyes. "Above all others, above all else, I will stand with you, protect you, honor you. I will be your partner, your mate, your family. This I swear." "I choose you," Kara echoed. "I will stand with you, protect you, honor you. I will be your partner, your mate, your family. This I swear." The elder tied their hands together with a braided cord, symbolizing their union. "You are bonded now in the eyes of the clan and the spirits. May your love be strong, your lives long, and your path blessed." The celebration lasted late into the night. Preston danced with Kara, awkward and laughing, while the clan cheered them on. He shared drinks with warriors who had once been his enemies. He accepted congratulations from Orcs who had threatened to kill him 6 months ago. And through it all, he held Kara's hand and marveled at the impossible journey that had brought him here. Later, in their dwelling, now truly their home, they lay together in comfortable silence. Preston traced the line of Kara's shoulder, the curve of her neck where the rope scars had faded to pale lines. "What are you thinking?" Kara asked sleepily. "That I would do it all again. Every moment, every hardship, if it meant ending up here with you. Even jumping off that cliff." "Especially jumping off that cliff," she laughed softly. "What would your younger self think? If you could go back and tell him where you would end up," Preston considered. "He would think I was insane, but he would also be jealous. Because for all his careful planning and safe choices, he was miserable, and I am happy." "I am happy too," Kara whispered. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be after everything." They drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth. Outside, the mountain wind howled, but inside, all was peaceful. Winter passed, giving way to spring. Preston and Kara settled into the rhythm of clan life. They built a larger dwelling to replace their small one with help from other clan members who had become friends. Kara set up a proper weaving area, and her work became prized throughout the clan. Preston took on more responsibilities, eventually being named as one of the clan's hunters and scouts. They traveled once to visit Groth's family, bringing gifts and sharing a meal. Groth's mother embraced them both and gave them her blessing, saying her son would have been happy to see a human and orc building a life together. Word of their bonding spread beyond Stone Peak. Other clans heard the story of the human who cut down hanged orcs, who fought for his mate, who was accepted into an orc clan. Some dismissed it as impossible rumor. Others were intrigued. A few even sent emissaries to see for themselves. And slowly, very slowly, things began to change. Not everywhere and not quickly, but change nonetheless. Another human was accepted into a different clan, bonded to an orc woman he had saved from bandits. An orc merchant was welcomed into a human settlement after negotiating a fair trade agreement. Small steps, tiny bridges being built across vast divides. Preston and Kara did not cause all of this change, but they were part of it. They were proof that it was possible, that the hatred and fear could be overcome, that love could cross any boundary. 2 years after their bonding, Kara told Preston she was pregnant. He stared at her in shock. "Is that? I did not know that was possible. It is rare, but not unheard of. Half-orc children exist, though not many." She bit her lip nervously. "Are you happy about this?" Preston swept her up in his arms, laughing. "Happy? I am terrified and overwhelmed and more happy than I can express. We are going to have a child, our child." The pregnancy was difficult, as the healer warned it might be. Half-orc children were larger than human babies, and Kara's body struggled. Preston stayed by her side as much as he could, supporting her, bringing her food and water, holding her when the pain got bad. The birth was long and dangerous, and there were moments when Preston feared he would lose them both. But Kara was strong and the healers were skilled, and finally, after hours of labor, a baby's cry filled the air, a boy. Green-skinned like his mother, but with Preston's gray eyes and something of his facial structure. Small tusks just visible in his tiny mouth. Perfect and impossible and theirs. "What should we name him?" Kara asked, exhausted but radiant, holding their son. Preston thought of the bridge where this had all begun, of the 7 women who had died and the one who had lived. He thought of the orc warrior who had taught him that enemies could be brothers. He thought of all the barriers they had crossed to reach this moment. "Bridge," Preston said softly. "We should call him Bridge, because he is the bridge between our peoples, between our worlds. He is proof that this is possible." Kara smiled. "Bridge. Yes, that is perfect." They named him Bridge in the orc language Kithril, which meant the crossing place. But Preston always called him Bridge, and the name stuck. Little Bridge grew quickly, strong and healthy. He had his mother's strength and his father's curiosity, and he was loved not just by his parents but by the entire clan. He became a symbol of hope, proof that orcs and humans could create something beautiful together. Preston watched his son grow, taught him to hunt and track, told him stories of both human and orc cultures. Kara taught him to weave and sing, passed down the traditions of her people. Bridge grew up knowing both worlds, belonging to both and limited by neither. 5 years after cutting down those ropes on the Milldale Bridge, Preston stood on a different bridge, one being built across the river, a joint project between Stone Peak Clan and a nearby human settlement. The war was a fading memory now, and while tension still existed, progress was being made. Kara stood beside him, holding Bridge's hand. Their son was 3 years old, bright and energetic, asking questions about everything he saw. "Da, why are we building a bridge?" Bridge asked in the mix of human and orc language he spoke fluently. "Because bridges connect people," Preston said, kneeling beside his son. "They let us cross divides, reach out to others, find common ground. Bridges are how we build peace, like you and Mama, exactly like me and Mama." Bridge considered this seriously, then nodded. "I like bridges." Preston laughed and picked up his son, holding him close. He looked at Kara, at the life they had built, at the clan that had become his family. He thought about the man he had been 5 years ago, bitter, lost, searching for meaning. That man had found 7 bodies hanging from a bridge and made a choice that changed everything. He had chosen to act, to stand for something, to risk everything for what was right. And that choice had led him here, to this moment, to this family, to this peace. "I like bridges too," Preston said softly. "I like them very much." Kara leaned her head against his shoulder, and together they watched the sun set over the river, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Behind them, orcs and humans worked side by side on the bridge, their voices mixing in the evening air. It was not perfect. There were still those who hated, still divisions to overcome, still work to be done. But it was progress. It was hope. It was proof that change was possible. And it had all started with one veteran who refused to walk away, who cut 7 ropes and saved 1 life, who proved that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you fight for others, without glory, without recognition, simply because it is right. Preston Davenport had found his fresh start, but it was nothing like he had imagined. It was better. It was a family, a purpose, a future where his son would grow up knowing that bridges between peoples were not just possible but essential. And every night, when he held Kara close and listened to Bridges' soft breathing from his bed across the room, Preston gave thanks for the day he looked up at that bridge and decided that enough was enough. That some lines could not be crossed. That some evils had to be opposed, no matter the cost. He had lost his old life that day. He had gained everything that mattered. The rope had creaked in the wind, and Preston had reached for his knife, and nothing had been the same since. And he would not change a single moment of it. Years continued to pass, each one adding layers to the story that had begun on that gray dawn at the Milldale Bridge. Preston's hair began to gray at the temples, and Kara's strength remained undiminished by time. Bridge grew from a curious child into a strong, thoughtful young man who moved easily between human and orc worlds, respected by both. The bridge project became the first of many. Trade routes opened between settlements. Mixed communities began to form at border locations. It was not always smooth. Old hatreds died hard, and there were still incidents of violence and prejudice. But the tide had turned, slowly and inexorably, toward peace. Preston and Kara had 3 more children, 2 daughters and another son. Each child was unique, carrying traits from both parents in different combinations. Their family became famous in its own way, a living symbol of what was possible when people chose love over fear. On the 10th anniversary of their bonding, the Stone Peak elders honored Preston with a new name, Kelthara, in the Orc tongue, meaning bridge builder. It was not just recognition of what he had done, but of what he represented. He had not just married into the clan. He had helped transform it, helped open it to new possibilities. Marcus Greaves, the human merchant, became a regular visitor and eventually a friend. He brought news from human lands, facilitated trade, and spread stories of the peace being built in the mountains. Other humans began to see that cooperation with orcs was not just possible but profitable and enriching. Groth's family remained close to Preston and Kara, and their children grew up playing together. The warrior's mother lived to see her grandchildren and Preston's children playing together, orc and half-orc children united in friendship, and she wept with joy to see how far they had come. There were setbacks. A raid by human extremists destroyed part of a mixed settlement, killing 3 orcs and 2 humans. An orc clan in the far north refused all contact with humans and threatened violence against any orc who cooperated with them. Preston received death threats more than once, crude messages left at the border warning him that traitors would be dealt with. But for every setback, there were victories. A human doctor traveled to Stone Peak to share medical knowledge with the orc healers, and in return learned orc healing techniques that saved lives in human settlements. An orc scholar and a human historian collaborated on a joint history of the war, telling both sides of the story honestly. Young people from both races began to question the prejudices they had been taught, seeking their own truths. Preston never forgot the 7 women who had died on that bridge. Every year, on the anniversary of that day, He and Kara traveled to the Milldale Bridge, now a neutral meeting place between territories, and left flowers in memory of the dead. Others began to join them, a small memorial service that grew larger each year. Humans who had lost family to orc attacks. Orcs who had lost family to human violence. All coming together to remember the cost of hatred and to commit to building something better. The blacksmith from Milldale, the one who had led the mob that hanged Kara's sisters, never apologized. He died 5 years after the incident, bitter and unrepentant. But his son, a young man who had watched the hangings and been sickened by them, sought out Preston and Kara to express his regret and his commitment to be different from his father. That son became one of the strongest advocates for human-orc cooperation in the region. As Preston entered his middle years, he began to train young scouts and hunters, both orc and the occasional human who sought to learn from him. He taught them tracking and survival, but also the lessons he had learned about seeing the person beneath the surface, about choosing courage over hatred, about building bridges instead of walls. Kara's weaving became renowned throughout the region. She developed a unique style that incorporated both orc and human techniques, creating tapestries that told stories of both cultures. Her work was displayed in clan halls and human manor houses alike, beautiful reminders of what could be created when different traditions merged. Bridge, their eldest son, grew into a natural leader. When he came of age, he chose to devote himself to peace building between humans and orcs, traveling to different settlements to mediate disputes and facilitate cooperation. He carried his parents' legacy forward, expanding on it, taking it to new places and new peoples. One evening, when Bridge was 20 and preparing for another journey, Preston sat with him by the fire. "Your mother and I are proud of you," Preston said. "You have become more than we ever imagined." "I only followed your example, Father. You taught me that the hardest choices are often the most important ones." "I taught you to cut ropes," Preston said with a slight smile. "You are building entirely new bridges. Same principle. See what is wrong, do something about it. Do not let fear or prejudice stop you." Bridge looked at his father seriously. "Do you ever regret it? That day at the bridge, you lost so much. You became an exile from your own people, risked your life, gave up any chance at a normal life." Preston looked across the fire at Kara, who was teaching their youngest daughter a new weaving pattern. He thought of his children, his friends, his life. He thought of the peace that was slowly, painfully being built, one connection at a time. "No," he said simply. "I do not regret it." "Not for a single moment." Bridge nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Good, because I am about to make some hard choices of my own, and it helps to know you believe it is worth it. Always. Standing up for what is right is always worth it, even when it costs you everything. Especially then." The years continued their march, and Preston and Kara grew old together. Their lives intertwined so completely that neither could imagine existing without the other. They told their grandchildren stories of the old days, of the war and the hanging and the desperate flight through the forest. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, amazed that their gentle grandfather and strong grandmother had lived through such dramatic events. On the 20th anniversary of the day, Preston cut those ropes. The Stone Peak clan and the human settlement of Milldale held a joint ceremony at the bridge. A monument was erected, simple but powerful, bearing the names of the 7 orc women who had died and a single-line inscription. "Let this be the last bridge of hatred. Let all future bridges unite rather than divide." Preston and Kara stood together as the monument was unveiled, their children and grandchildren surrounding them, representatives from a dozen orc clans and human settlements in attendance. Marcus Greaves was there, old now but still vital, along with Groth's family and countless others whose lives had been touched by the choice Preston made 2 decades before. The human mayor of Milldale, the son of the blacksmith, the one who had sought forgiveness, spoke first. We gather here to remember a dark day and to celebrate the light that came from it. We honor the dead, and we honor those who refuse to let hate have the final word. Preston Davenport and Kara, you are living proof that our peoples can not only coexist, but thrive together. Thank you for your courage, your persistence, and your love. Throck, now the senior elder of Stone Peak clan, spoke next. The human Preston came to us as a stranger, an enemy, a man with blood on his hands, but he also came with honor in his heart and a willingness to see us as people. He fought for us, bled for us, built a life with us. He is Orc in all but body, and we are honored to call him clan. Preston was asked to speak, and he stood with Kara beside him, looking out at the assembled crowd. Human and Orc faces looked back at him, waiting. 20 years ago I was lost, Preston began. The war had ended, but I could not find peace. I did not know what I was looking for, but I knew what I was running from: the memory of all the violence I had participated in, all the choices I regretted. And then I came to this bridge and saw something so wrong, so unjust, that I could not walk away. I did not think about the consequences. I just acted. He squeezed Kara's hand. I thought I was saving one life that day. I did not realize I was saving my own. Kara gave me a purpose, a home, a family. She gave me the chance to build instead of destroy, to create instead of kill. Everything good in my life started the moment I cut those ropes. Preston looked around at all the faces, human and Orc, young and old. We are not finished. There is still hate in the world, still fear, still people on both sides who cannot see past old grievances. But we are making progress. Every bridge we build, every friendship we forge, every child born who knows both cultures, these are victories. Small, quiet victories that add up to real change. He touched the monument. These women died because of hate. Let us make sure they did not die for nothing. Let us build a world where no one has to hang from a bridge for the crime of being different. Let us build bridges of connection, of understanding, of love. The ceremony ended with a shared meal. Humans and Orcs eating together, talking, laughing, sharing stories. Children of both races played together without the fear and suspicion their parents had grown up with. It was not perfect. There were still awkward moments, still prejudices lurking beneath the surface, but it was real progress, tangible and undeniable. As the sun set, Preston and Kara walked back to their home in Stone Peak, holding hands as they had for 20 years. They were not young anymore, and the path was harder on old knees than it once had been. But they walked it together as they had walked every path since that day on the bridge. You think it will last? Kara asked. The peace we have built, or will it fall apart when we are gone? It will last, Preston said with certainty. Because it is not just us anymore. It is Bridge and his work and all the other peace builders like him. It is the children growing up knowing both cultures. It is every person who makes the choice to see beyond prejudice, to build instead of destroy. We started something, but it is bigger than us now. I hope you are right. I am right. We have spent 20 years proving it is possible. Others will carry it forward. They reached their home and sat outside, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear singing, a mix of human and Orc voices blending in harmony. I love you, Kara said softly. Thank you for cutting that rope, for saving me, for building this life with me. I love you too, Preston replied. Thank you for giving me a reason to cut it. For showing me what real courage looks like. For being my partner, my mate, my everything. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from terrible circumstances, who had proven that love could cross any divide. The rope had creaked in the wind, and Preston had reached for his knife, and everything had changed. It was the best decision he ever made. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew deep, Preston and Kara sat together, hand in hand, living proof that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to walk away, refuse to accept injustice, refuse to let hate win. They had built their bridge, and it would stand long after they were gone, a testament to courage, love, and the simple, profound truth that we are all, at the end of the day, just people trying to find our way home. And home, Preston had learned, was not a place. It was a person. It was the family you built. It was the choice you made again and again to stand for something that mattered. Home was the moment you stopped running and started building. Home was 7 ropes cut on a gray dawn morning and every moment that followed. Home was here now, with Kara beside him and their life spread out behind them like a tapestry of all the colors of both their worlds woven together. Preston closed his eyes and smiled, content in the knowledge that he had found what he was searching for all those years ago. He had found home. And it was more than he ever could have imagined.